The message came in at 3:47 p.m. on December 28th, right as I, Helena O'Connor, was going over the final defense strategy with my general counsel Reese for tomorrow's hearing. My phone buzzed once, a private text from my younger sister. Don't come to New Year's Eve. My fiancé is a lead enforcement attorney at the CFPB. His family is all about reputation. He can't know about your situation right now. I hadn't even put the phone down before the family group chat lit up. Mom, Natalie's right, honey. This is a huge night for her. Dad, we just want everything to go smoothly. Whitney. Maybe next year when things are more settled. Even Travis, who hardly ever types more than a thumbs up, chimed in. It's better for everyone this way. Your situation. That's still what they called it after all these years. I read every message, felt that familiar twist in my stomach, and typed back just 2 words. Understood. Then I set the phone face down on my desk. Through the glass wall of my corner office on the top floor of Apex Realty Tech in downtown Denver, Casey was waiting with the thick briefing binder stamped "Confidential Preparations" for the biggest regulatory hearing the company had ever faced. None of them in that group chat had the slightest clue that tomorrow morning my sister's fiancé would walk into the most high-stakes professional confrontation of his career and come face-to-face with exactly who I've become. Have you ever been deliberately hidden by your own family from a big event because they were afraid you'd embarrass them? If that's ever happened to you, drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Who knows, your experience might line up in ways you wouldn't believe with what's coming next in this video. I set the phone face down and turned back to the large monitor on my desk. Reese was pointing at a section of the CFPB disclosure requirements, highlighting potential weak points in their initial allegations against Apex Realty Tech. The hearing binder was already thick with data appendices, market analysis reports, and legal precedents we'd pulled together over the past months. Casey stepped in quietly with fresh coffee, placing it beside me without a word. He knew these late sessions well. As Reese continued explaining the strategy for countering their claims on consumer data handling, my mind drifted to how I ended up here running a company that had quietly become a major player in real estate technology. Growing up in our family home in the Denver suburbs, everyone assumed I'd follow the path laid out for us. Dad had built a solid career in commercial banking. Mom worked in corporate law for years before focusing on the family, and the expectation was clear, high-achieving professions that came with prestige and stability. When I got accepted to Harvard for undergraduate studies in applied mathematics, with a focus on economics, my parents were thrilled at first. They threw a small celebration dinner, toasting to how it would open doors to law school or Wall Street firms. Whitney, already married to her successful real estate developer husband, by then kept saying how perfect it would be for networking in finance circles. Even Natalie, still in high school, looked up to the idea of her big sister at an Ivy League school. But during my junior year, I became obsessed with the inefficiencies in real estate valuation. Traditional appraisals relied too much on human judgment and outdated comparables, leading to massive discrepancies, especially in volatile markets. I started building predictive models in my dorm room, using machine learning to factor in everything from school district ratings to microeconomic trends, and even climate risk projections. Professors encouraged it, and I turned down summer internships at big banks to refine the algorithms. After graduation, the offers came flooding in. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all the names our family revered. Dad sent emails with job descriptions, highlighted. Mom arranged calls with friends in the industry. But I turned them all down. Instead, I took a junior analyst role at a small proptech firm in Boulder, just an hour's drive from Denver, to learn the practical side of real estate data. They were impressed but cautious when I proposed integrating AI for automated valuations. That's when I launched my first venture at 24. I poured my savings into it, about $50,000 from graduation gifts and part-time consulting gigs, and incorporated it as a simple LLC. The platform showed promise early on, securing pilot contracts with a few regional brokerages. For a brief moment, I thought about sharing the news at family dinners. But every time I brought up my work conversations shifted quickly to Natalie's college applications or Whitney's latest society event. Then the market dipped hard that year. Investors pulled back from early-stage tech, and my lead backer backed out at the last minute. The company folded within 18 months. The family found out only because I had to move back home briefly to regroup. Dad suggested it was time to get serious and consider grad school for an MBA or even law. Mom echoed that the startup world was too risky for someone without a safety net. Whitney offered to introduce me to entry-level positions through her husband's connections. Travis was the only one who called me privately that week. "Hey, sis." He said, his voice steady over the phone. "I know it sucks right now, but you put everything into it. That's more than most people do. If you need to talk through the numbers or whatever, I'm here." It meant something then. His quiet support stood out amid the others' disappointment. But even Travis stopped asking after a while. Family gatherings moved on to safer topics: Natalie's internships, Whitney's charity galas. I didn't bring up my work again. Instead, I rebuilt in silence. From a cramped apartment in lower downtown Denver, I refined the failed model's core algorithm, making it more robust with better data sources. To avoid early scrutiny, I set up Apex Realty Tech under a holding company with a nondescript name, listing myself only as a technical founder in internal documents. No public announcements, no social media posts. The breakthrough came when a mid-sized real estate investment trust in Texas agreed to test the platform. Our projections reduced their valuation errors by 28% in the first quarter, saving them millions in overpayments. Word spread quietly in industry circles. Soon venture firms approached, first a seed round of $2 million, then Series A at $15 million valuation. I hired carefully data scientists from MIT and Stanford engineers with experience at Zillow competitors. We expanded offices to a full floor in a high-rise overlooking the Rockies, but I kept my personal life completely separate. By the time we hit Series B, $80 million raised valuation pushing 9 figures, Forbes reached out for a profile on emerging proptech leaders. I declined the interview, opting for anonymity to focus on the technology. The company grew to over 200 employees across 3 states, our tools now used by major lenders for mortgage approvals and by institutional investors for portfolio optimization. All without a single family member knowing the scale of it. It wasn't about hiding out of spite. Early on, after the first failure, I'd learned that sharing progress only invited unsolicited advice or pity. Silence became protection, shielding the company from any perceived nepotism or external drama. Investors valued the low-key leadership. Employees respected the focus on results over publicity. And personally, it allowed me to build on my terms without the weight of old expectations. Reese cleared his throat, pulling me back to the present. "Helena, we're solid on the privacy compliance section. Their case relies heavily on misinterpreted user consent logs." I nodded, scanning the page. He was right. We had the evidence to dismantle it, point by point. As the evening wore on, Casey updated the presentation slides with the latest economic impact study we'd commissioned independently. Rosa joined via video from her home office, walking through financial disclosures that proved our practices not only complied, but exceeded federal guidelines. The team had poured countless late nights into this preparation, unaware of the personal layer about to unfold. By the time we wrapped up, the city lights sparkled below. I leaned back in my chair, satisfied with our readiness. Whatever tomorrow brought professionally, I'd earned my place at that table through years of quiet determination. The memory of that Thanksgiving dinner surfaced as I stared at the briefing binder, the team's voices fading into background for a moment. It had been held at the family home in the quiet Cherry Creek neighborhood of Denver, the table set with Mom's usual spread of roasted turkey, cranberry relish, and all the traditional sides. Natalie had brought Wesley Hargrove as her +1 for the first time, introducing him with that bright smile she reserved for big announcements. "This is Wesley." She set her hand on his arm as everyone settled in. He's just been promoted to lead enforcement attorney at the CFPB, heading up some of their major cases. Dad leaned forward, immediately eyes lighting up. CFPB, that's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right? Impressive. What kind of cases are you handling these days? Wesley nodded modestly, carving into his turkey as he answered. Mostly enforcement actions against companies that mishandle consumer data or engage in deceptive practices in lending and real estate tech. It's rewarding work holding big players accountable. The conversation flowed easily from there. Mom asked about his background, learning he'd grown up in D.C. with a father in federal regulation and a mother who taught constitutional law. Whitney shared stories from her husband's dealings with compliance issues in commercial development, drawing parallels that made Wesley nod appreciatively. Even Travis, visiting from his job in Boulder, asked pointed questions about high-profile settlements the agency had won recently. I sat quietly, at first passing dishes and listening as praise circled the table. Natalie beamed every time someone complimented her choice, squeezing Wesley's hand under the tablecloth. When the focus inevitably shifted to updates from everyone, Whitney talked about her latest charity board position. Travis mentioned a promotion at his engineering firm, and Natalie detailed her graduate program in public policy. Eventually, Wesley turned to me politely. Helena, Natalie mentions you work in real estate somehow. What exactly do you do? I kept my response straightforward. I'm developing software tools to help with property valuations and market forecasting. He smiled, the kind of polite acknowledgement that ended inquiries quickly. That's useful support for the industry. Real estate needs better data tools, especially with all the fluctuations we've seen. The topic shifted almost immediately back to Natalie's plans and how Wesley's role might intersect with policy work she was interested in. No one pressed for details on my projects, not Dad, who might have seen connections to finance, or Mom, who could have linked it to legal implications. It was as if support summed it up neatly, a side function rather than something central. I noticed the subtle bias in his tone, the assumption that tech and real estate was auxiliary to the real decision-makers like brokers or regulators. It didn't sting as much as it could have. By then, I'd grown used to conversations gliding past my work. Dessert came, Mom's pumpkin pie with whipped cream, and talk turned to holiday plans, everyone excited about Natalie's upcoming internship possibilities. Driving home that night through Denver's tree-lined streets, the city's lights reflecting off early snow, I replayed the evening in my head. Wesley seemed sharp, ambitious, the kind of partner my family had always envisioned for one of us. His casual dismissal of my field wasn't malicious, just reflective of how many in traditional finance and law viewed emerging tech helpful, but not groundbreaking. A couple of weeks later, back in the office, Reese flagged something during our routine compliance review. We were going over incoming regulatory notices, cross-referencing them with ongoing projects. This one's flagged for escalation, he said, sliding a document across the conference table. It was a preliminary inquiry from the CFPB into data privacy practices at several proptech firms, including ours. The lead name on the investigation team, Wesley Hargrove. I read through the details. The allegations centered on whether user consent for data sharing and valuations was sufficiently clear, and if algorithms could inadvertently lead to discriminatory outcomes in lending recommendations. Nothing we hadn't anticipated in our audits, but serious enough to demand a full response. Reese noticed my pause. Problem? Not exactly, I replied, keeping my voice even. The lead attorney, he's engaged to my sister. He leaned back, processing that. That's a potential conflict. Under federal ethics rules, he should recuse himself or at least disclose the relationship to avoid any appearance of bias. We discussed options carefully. Disclosing it ourselves could escalate things unnecessarily, drawing scrutiny to personal ties that didn't exist in our operations. Reese advised monitoring quietly. At first, many inquiries resolved without formal action. But if it advances, he added, he'll have to step aside. CFPB enforcers are bound by strict conflict policies. Family connections to a target's leadership qualify. I agreed. Revealing the engagement prematurely might force his hand in ways that complicated family dynamics without need. Better to strengthen our position internally, enhance transparency reports, run additional fairness audits on the algorithms, document every user consent flow. Over the following months, the inquiry deepened as expected in high-stakes sectors. Wesley's team requested data samples which we provided redacted per protocol. No direct contact, everything through channels. I never mentioned it at family gatherings, and Natalie, busy with wedding planning chatter, remained oblivious. The decision to stay silent wasn't easy. Part of me wondered if transparency could have nipped it early, but Reese reminded me of precedents. Premature disclosures sometimes invited broader fishing expeditions. Our compliance was ironclad. The models used anonymized aggregates with opt-out options exceeding requirements. Focusing on defense made sense professionally. As the case built toward a formal hearing, our preparations intensified. Rosa modeled financial impacts of potential remedies showing minimal risk. Casey coordinated with external auditors for independent verification. The team rallied, sensing the stakes without knowing the personal angle. Sitting through those updates, I felt a quiet resolve. Whatever biases lingered from that dinner table wouldn't influence outcomes here. This was about facts, data, and rigorous standards we'd built from the ground up. Reese closed his notebook. We're in a strong position. Their claims don't hold up against our documentation. I nodded, glancing at the city skyline. He was right. We'd prove it methodically. That New Year's Eve found me alone in my high-rise apartment overlooking downtown Denver, a glass of expensive Cabernet on the coffee table, and the city fireworks scheduled to start soon in the distance. I had ordered Thai takeout pad Thai and green curry from my usual spot in Capitol Hill, just a short drive away, but delivered hot despite the holiday rush. The quiet felt deliberate, a choice, after years of navigating family obligations that always left me on the periphery. My phone sat beside the food container screen, occasionally lighting up with notifications. Whitney had tagged me in a batch of old photos she'd posted earlier, throwbacks from holidays past when we all gathered at the family home without the undercurrents that had developed over time. One showed us kids around the Christmas tree, Natalie on Dad's lap, while Whitney and Travis posed with new gifts. I was off to the side, absorbed in a book about computer programming I'd gotten that year. Another captured a summer barbecue in the backyard, everyone laughing over grilled steaks, the kind of effortless joy that seemed simpler before careers and expectations complicated things. I scrolled further, pausing on a shot from a few years earlier. Thanksgiving again, plates piled high, Wesley in the frame, for the first time, though the photo was cropped to focus on Natalie. The memories stirred a mix of nostalgia and detachment. Those moments had felt inclusive once before, paths diverged so sharply. Then the group chat picked up activity. Photos poured in from the rooftop party in Manhattan they'd chosen this year. Natalie in a sparkling dress next to Wesley, both raising champagne flutes with the skyline behind them. Mom and Dad in formal attire smiling with Wesley's parents. Whitney with her husband captioning about the incredible view. Travis sent a quick selfie from the bar surrounded by colleagues he'd flown in to join. Amid the images, Wesley posted a message, grateful for an amazing year and looking forward to closing out a major enforcement action. Soon, big win for consumer protection on the horizon. He had no idea the major action involved my company directly. The irony settled in as I read it, not with anger, but a calm certainty. We'd anticipated every angle his team raised, building counterarguments layered with independent audits and user impact studies. I finished the curry, savoring the spice against the wine's richness, then cleared the containers. The fireworks began outside, bursts of color reflecting off the glass towers. Cheers echoed faintly from streets below, parties spilling out into the crisp air. I watched for a while from the balcony, the cold biting just enough to sharpen focus. Turning off the lights, I lay on the couch, mind running through the rebuttals we'd refined. Months of work had gone into simulating questioning sessions, stress-testing data flows for any vulnerability. The algorithms weren't just accurate, they'd helped everyday buyers avoid overpaying in inflated markets and alerted lenders to risks early. If anything, our tools advanced the very protections the agency championed. Sleep came eventually deep and uninterrupted. The alarm woke me early, the city still hushed under a light snowfall. I dressed carefully tailored navy suits, subtle accessories that conveyed authority without flash, then headed out. The Federal Conference Center was only a 15-minute drive from my building, traffic non-existent on the holiday morning. I arrived well ahead of schedule, parking in the underground garage and taking the elevator to the designated floor. Security waved me through with the pre-cleared badge. Casey was already there, waiting in the lobby with 2 steaming coffees from the on-site cafe. "Black for you, no sugar," he said, handing one over. We moved to the assigned preparation room, a spacious suite with whiteboards and projectors. Rosa arrived next, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, pulling up the latest financial models on the large screen. The impact projections are tighter than ever, show zero evidence of deceptive practices, actually demonstrates net consumer savings across tested markets. We reviewed key slides together, highlighting how our consent mechanisms went beyond standard requirements, with multi-step verifications and easy revocation options. Reese joined shortly after, spreading out printed copies of legal citations. Their precedents rely on cases with clear intent to mislead. Ours has proactive fairness checks built in from day one. The 3 of them moved seamlessly through the material, Casey cueing visuals, Rosa walking economic benefits, Reese anticipating procedural objections. Their confidence stemmed from the groundwork we'd laid collectively. No one doubted the strength of our position. As we fine-tuned the opening statement, I felt grounded in the preparation. This wasn't personal deflection, it was defending innovation that genuinely improved outcomes for homeowners and investors alike. The clock approached start time. We gathered our materials, ready to head into the main hearing room. The hearing room doors opened precisely on schedule, and the CFPB team filed in with practiced efficiency. Wesley Hargrove led the group, thick binder in hand, flanked by 2 senior analysts and a staff attorney. They took their places at the long table opposite us, arranging documents and laptops with quiet focus. The panel of administrative judges sat elevated at the front, joined by neutral observers from related agencies. Wesley shuffled papers as he settled, reviewing notes one last time. Then he glanced up to survey the respondent's side, standard procedure to identify key players. His eyes scanned left to right, landing on me seated dead center. The binder slipped from his fingers, hitting the table with a sharp thud that echoed in the hushed space. His chair scraped harshly against the floor as he half rose, face draining of color. "Helena." The name escaped in a stunned whisper, but loud enough to carry. The room froze. Analysts on his side exchanged confused looks. One of the judges raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. Wesley's supervisor, a seasoned director named Patricia Lang, narrowed her eyes and leaned toward him. "Counselor." He couldn't respond coherently, mouth opening and closing as recognition fully hit. Patricia followed his gaze to me, then back to him, piecing it together quickly. She stood abruptly. "We need a brief recess. Security, please escort Mr. Hargrove to the consultation room." 2 uniformed officers near the door moved forward without hesitation. Wesley didn't resist, but he looked dazed as they guided him out, binder forgotten on the table. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Murmurs rippled through the observers. Patricia addressed the panel calmly. "Your Honors, an unforeseen personal conflict has just come to light involving lead counsel and the respondent's principal. We request time to confer with ethics compliance and determine next steps." The presiding judge nodded. "Recess granted. 15 minutes. As the room cleared temporarily, Casey leaned in. "That was unexpected. Reese remained composed. Standard protocol. Federal employees must disclose any relationship that could appear to influence impartiality. Family ties to a party in an enforcement action definitely qualify. Rosa checked her watch. They'll pull him entirely. Can't risk taint on the record. I stayed seated, reviewing my notes. The shock on Wesley's face replayed the realization crashing in waves. Not just professional surprise, but personal. He'd built his case, assuming an anonymous corporate target, never imagining his fiancée's sister at the helm. When the panel reconvened, Patricia returned alone with a replacement attorney, a senior colleague I'd seen named in filings. "Your Honors," she began. "Due to a previously undisclosed familial connection, Mr. Hargrove has recused himself effective immediately. I'll assume lead responsibilities." The judges acknowledged the substitution without comment, procedural adjustments common in such matters. Proceedings resumed. I rose first for the respondent's opening presentation. "Good morning. My name is Helena O'Connor, founder and CEO of Apex Realty Tech. Thank you for the opportunity to address the Bureau's concerns directly." The main screen activated behind me, displaying our company overview timeline from inception, growth metrics, user-base demographics. I walked through the platform's core function, AI-driven valuation models that aggregate hundreds of data points beyond traditional comparables, including economic indicators, infrastructure changes, and environmental factors. These tools, I continued advancing to consent flow diagrams, are designed for transparency. Every data use requires explicit user opt-in with plain language explanations and one-click revocation. Independent audits confirm compliance rates above 98%. Rosa took over the financial segment, projecting charts that illustrated cost savings for consumers, average reductions in overvaluation errors leading to fairer mortgage terms. Our models have prevented an estimated $200 million in potential consumer harm across tested portfolios. Reese handled the legal framework, citing specific CFPB guidelines and demonstrating how our practices aligned or exceeded them. He addressed each allegation point by point: no evidence of deceptive marketing, no hidden data sharing, algorithmic fairness, tested annually by third-party experts using methodologies approved by the Bureau itself. Questions from the panel came steadily, probing on edge cases, data sourcing integrity, potential biases in predictive outputs. We answered with prepared exhibits, randomized testing results, anonymized case studies, correspondence with regulators during development phases. One judge asked about scalability risks. I responded directly. We've invested heavily in ongoing monitoring with human oversight layers for high-value transactions. The goal isn't replacement of professional appraisers, but augmentation, providing better information for all parties. Another inquired on complaint volumes. Rosa pulled up the dashboard. Less than 0.02% of users have raised concerns, mostly resolved within 48 hours through dedicated support. The replacement attorney cross-examined methodically, but without the aggressive edge Wesley might have brought. Objections were few, overruled quickly when raised. Hours passed with focused exchange, data versus interpretation, intent versus outcome. Our preparation shone through, every claim backed by traceable evidence, every projection grounded in real-world deployment. By late afternoon, the panel called closure. We've heard extensive testimony and reviewed substantial documentation. The record will remain open briefly for final submissions, but preliminary indications suggest many issues stem from misapplication of guidelines to innovative technology. Patricia conceded several points in her wrap-up, noting areas where further clarification might resolve outstanding matters without formal findings. As everyone packed up, the atmosphere felt shifted, not adversarial defeat, but acknowledgement of complexity in regulating emerging tools. Casey gathered our materials efficiently. Rosa smiled faintly. That went better than modeled. Reese nodded. Clean record. They'll likely close with guidance rather than penalties. I glanced at the empty chair where Wesley had sat. The personal collision had forced clarity on both sides, stripping away assumptions. We exited the room together, the team's quiet satisfaction palpable. Whatever fallout awaited outside these walls inside, we'd defended the work on its merits. We left the conference center together, the team's mood lighter than it had been in months. Casey drove while Rosa and Reese discussed follow-up filings in the back seat. The drive back to the office took us through downtown Denver's bustling streets, past coffee shops filling with afternoon crowds and office workers heading out for lunch. By the time we reached the building, my phone had started vibrating repeatedly. I glanced at the screen, missed calls from Whitney, then a string of texts from Natalie that grew longer as I scrolled. Whitney's voice message came first when I played it back in the elevator. "Helena, what on earth happened today? Wesley just got pulled from the hearing, he won't say why, but everyone's talking about some conflict. Call me back." Natalie's messages were more frantic paragraphs about how embarrassed Wesley felt, questions about whether I'd known all along, pleas to explain before things escalated further. I didn't respond yet, pocketing the phone as we stepped onto our floor. The office hummed with normal activity, developers at standing desks, analysts reviewing market feeds on multiple monitors. A few team members looked up curiously, sensing something significant from our expressions. Reese headed to his corner office to draft the post-hearing memo, Rosa to finance for impact modeling. I settled at my desk reviewing notes from the session when Casey buzzed from reception. "Your mother is in the lobby. She says it's urgent." Mom appeared in the doorway minutes later, coat still on, hair slightly disheveled from the drive across town. Casey had escorted her up, giving me a subtle nod before closing the door for privacy. She stopped just inside, eyes sweeping the space, the expansive view of the Front Range Mountains, the modern artwork on walls, the large digital display showing real-time platform metrics. Then she noticed the glass-walled recognition area visible from my office-framed Industry Awards magazine covers, featuring Apex as a PropTech innovator, plaques from partnerships with major lenders. Mom walked slowly toward it, reading headlines aloud under her breath. Apex Realty Tech named top workplace, CEO Helena O'Connor on Disruptors list. She touched one frame gently as if confirming it was real. Turning back to me, her voice was quiet. "How long has this been yours?" I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. She sat still, holding her purse tightly. 6 years since founding. Longer if you count development. She shook her head slowly. "We thought you were coordinating data for someone else's company. Natalie said you worked in support." I pulled a folder from the drawer, annual reports, client testimonials, a recent feature from a national business journal. Placed it in front of her. "These are public. Revenue figures, user growth, independent validations of our compliance standards." Mom opened it, flipping pages with trembling fingers. Letters from mortgage giants praising accuracy improvement studies, showing reduced lending risks for first-time buyers. "This is substantial. Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, finally looking up. I met her gaze steadily. Would it have changed anything? When I turned down the bank offers, the response was disappointment. When the first venture failed, suggestions came to find something stable. Conversations always moved on quickly. She flinched slightly. "We worried. The risks seemed so high." "Risks I chose," I replied evenly. "And managed." But sharing updates only led to more advice about safer paths. Mom closed the folder. "Wesley called your father in a state. Said there was a conflict, that you're the principal for the company he's been investigating. He's facing questions now about disclosure." I nodded. "Federal rules require recusal for family relationships in enforcement matters. He should have flagged it earlier." She leaned forward. "This affects Natalie too. The wedding plans, his position, everything feels uncertain now." "The professional outcome stands on evidence," I said. "Personal consequences are separate." Mom's eyes searched mine. "Were you waiting for this moment to prove something?" "No," I answered. I built this because the problem mattered better tools for fairer housing decisions. The overlap with Wesley was coincidence none of us foresaw. She sat back processing. Your father wants to understand how we missed this. We saw the quiet one, the different one, not this. I spread the reports between us. These milestones happened over years. Investor announcements, product launches, team expansions. If interest had been shown earlier, perhaps conversations would have included them. Mom traced a graph showing user adoption growth. We assumed you needed guidance still. Assumptions shape what people see, I said. When paths diverged, updates became irrelevant. The conversation stretched, touching on specific memories, holiday dinners, where topics shifted from my work emails about job openings forwarded without asking if I wanted them. Mom defended some as concern but acknowledged others as misjudgments. Whitney called again during our talk. Mom glanced at her phone but let it ring. She's upset on Natalie's behalf. Understandable, I replied. But the hearing addressed regulatory concerns with facts. Personal feelings don't alter that. Mom gathered her coat eventually. Your father and I need time with this. It's a lot to absorb. I walked her to the elevator. Take the time you need. She paused before stepping in. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Helena, even if learning it this way hurts. The doors closed. I returned to my desk, the office quiet around me. Casey brought fresh water. Everything okay? For now, I said. The day's events had shifted dynamics irrevocably, but the company's foundation remained solid. Natalie and Wesley arrived unannounced one afternoon, Casey buzzing me from reception with a neutral tone that conveyed the surprise. I cleared my schedule for the next hour and had him show them up. They entered together, Natalie first, with tight shoulders, Wesley behind, looking drained in his suit. I offered seats across the desk. Natalie sat immediately. Wesley hesitated before joining her. The office felt larger in the silence that followed. Wesley spoke first, voice measured. I owe you context on the recusal. Once the inquiry targeted Apex specifically, I suspected a connection through Natalie. I submitted a request to transfer the file internally, standard form for potential conflicts. My director denied it, citing the case's visibility and my track record. He wanted the closure for the team's metrics. He paused, rubbing his temple. I should have pushed harder or escalated to ethics directly. Hindsight makes that clear. Natalie cut in sharply. You knew months ago and said nothing. This timing right before our engagement announcements go wide feels deliberate, like you waited to humiliate us at the worst moment. I let her words hang, observing the tension in her posture, the way she gripped the armrest. The overlap wasn't engineered, I replied calmly. Professional paths crossed without coordination. She leaned forward. Paths don't just cross like this. You built an empire in secret, let Wesley pursue the case, then sat there as lead respondent. How is that not calculated to hurt me when it mattered most? Wesley placed a hand on her arm gently. Nat, we don't know intent. But she shook it off. Intent or not, the damage is done. His colleagues are questioning judgment. My friends ask why the hearing turned into family drama. Everything we've planned feels tainted now. The door opened, then Casey stepping aside as Travis walked in, carry-on bag still in hand. He'd clearly flown in recently. The Boulder to Denver route was short, but his tie was loosened from travel. Heard you were here? He said to Natalie, giving her a quick hug before turning to me. Figured this conversation needed all perspectives. He took the remaining chair, aligning himself beside them physically. Look, Helena, nobody's saying you don't deserve success, but dropping this bomb without warning, it's wrecked Natalie's timeline and put Wesley under internal review. Feels like payback for old stuff we should have handled better. Natalie nodded vigorously. Exactly. If you'd shared even a fraction earlier, Wesley could have recused cleanly. Instead, it exploded publicly. Travis continued. We're family. That should count for something, heads up at least. Using your position this way comes off as retaliation for perceived slights. I listened without interruption, noting the alignment 3-against-1 echoes of past dynamics where majority views prevailed. Wesley seemed less accusatory, more resigned, but stayed silent as the siblings pressed. When they finished, I opened a drawer and retrieved a slim folder, copies of public ethics guidelines, timelines from the inquiry's progression, and anonymized notes from Reese on conflict reporting requirements. Passed it to Wesley first. These outline CFPB standards for disclosure. Familial relationships to principals in active matters require immediate reporting upon awareness. The form you submitted was denied, but escalation options existed direct to OIG or external counsel. He flipped through, expression tightening as he read sections highlighted. I know the rules. Then you understand the review isn't personal, I said. It's procedural consequence, Natalie interjected. Consequence you could have mitigated by speaking up, Travis added. Or by not building everything in hiding to begin with. I closed the folder. Choices accumulated over years. Sharing progress invited redirection to safer careers. Silence allowed focus without interference. Natalie's voice rose. Silence also allowed this collision. You prioritized the company over family stability. Wesley finally spoke again. She's right that earlier disclosure from any side might have changed assignment, but the denial came from above career pressure to deliver wins. Travis shook his head. Doesn't excuse letting it reach hearing day without warning us. The accusations layered intentional harm, selfishness, weaponized achievement. I absorbed them, recognizing patterns from earlier confrontations with Mom, the defensive unity forming. When the room quieted, I addressed them collectively. I've heard the impacts: professional scrutiny for Wesley, social fallout for Natalie, discomfort for everyone. Those are real. Natalie softened slightly. Then help fix it. Talk to someone, downplay the conflict, anything to reduce the noise. I met her eyes directly. My role ends at compliance. Further involvement would risk impropriety claims from the other direction. Travis frowned. So nothing. After all this. From today forward, I stated evenly, I carry no obligation to explain achievements or shield reputations within the family. Decisions made long ago set this course. Navigating outcomes now falls to each individually. Wesley exhaled slowly. That's fair professionally. Natalie stood abruptly. Fair. This fractures everything we've built. Travis rose too, supporting her elbow. Think about what you're saying, Helena. Bridges matter. They moved toward the door together. Wesley paused last. For what it's worth, the platform's work is impressive. The evidence was compelling. The door closed behind them softly. Casey appeared moments later. Need anything? Just space, I replied. The confrontation had clarified boundaries more than any prior talk. Outside, Denver's afternoon traffic hummed below. Inside, the office resumed its rhythm, emails flowing, teams collaborating on next phase features. The divide felt permanent, not from anger but exhausted alignment. Explanations had run their course. The fallout unfolded gradually in the months that followed, pieces falling into place without any intervention from me. Wesley's internal review at the CFPB escalated quickly once the ethics office examined the timeline. Records showed he'd become aware of the potential conflict early enough to report it properly, but the delayed submission combined with the public recusal triggered a formal investigation. He ended up on paid administrative leave, then suspended without pay for 6 months pending final determination. Colleagues distanced themselves to avoid association, and advancement opportunities dried up in an agency where reputation meant everything. Natalie called off the engagement shortly after. Wesley's family, prominent in D.C. regulatory circles, cited the risk to their name as the deciding factor. Too much uncertainty for a high-profile wedding they'd been planning. She moved out of their shared apartment in Arlington back to a temporary place near Cherry Creek while figuring next steps. Social invitations slowed. The perfect couple narrative no longer fit. Whitney stopped reaching out after I declined 3 separate dinner invitations, each framed as chances to clear the air. Her messages turned curt, then ceased. Travis blocked my number following a brief exchange where he accused me of prioritizing pride over blood ties. Dad sent one email asking if we could talk as adults, but I left it unread. Mom tried forwarding old family photos, perhaps hoping nostalgia would bridge the gap, but those went unanswered too. I made quiet changes on my end. Through the company's philanthropic arm, I established an anonymous scholarship fund for underrepresented students pursuing degrees in data science applied to real estate, covering tuition at state universities for those from modest backgrounds. The foundation handled administration. My name appeared nowhere on public materials. Personal adjustments came next. I changed my private cell number, routing only essential contacts through a new one. The old family home in the suburbs, title still partially in my name from an inheritance trust. Years earlier, went on the market. A young couple bought it quickly, excited about the location near good schools. Closing day felt final, driving away without looking back. Apex Realty Tech thrived in the aftermath. With the regulatory cloud lifted, the Bureau ultimately issuing only minor guidance letters rather than fines, we secured partnerships with 2 national lenders for exclusive valuation integration. User numbers crossed new thresholds. International inquiries arrived from Canada and the UK. The team expanded again, hiring specialists in ethical AI to stay ahead of evolving standards. Board meetings focused on expansion strategies, potential acquisitions in adjacent markets like commercial leasing analytics. Rosa presented forecasts showing sustained growth. Reese confirmed clean compliance across jurisdictions. Casey managed the increased pace, seamlessly coordinating travel for industry conferences, where I spoke on panels about responsible innovation. Weekends brought hikes in the foothills, solo runs along the Platte River Trail, dinners with colleagues who had become chosen family. The apartment felt more like home now, filled with books on urban planning and framed patents from early algorithm iterations. No dramatic reconciliation attempts came, no tearful apologies or sudden realizations. The distance grew organically, fed by unresolved resentments on their side, and my acceptance that shared history didn't obligate continued involvement. Looking back from this vantage, the deepest divides aren't always born from hatred or betrayal. Sometimes they're simply the result of expectations that evolved in completely different directions, leaving no common ground left to stand on. People change, priorities shift, and what once connected us can fade without malice. Success, I've learned, doesn't require validation from those who couldn't see the vision early. It stands on its own merits. The impact created, the problems solved, the lives quietly improved through better information in a complex market. For anyone watching, their own path diverge from family assumptions, build what matters to you. Protect your energy for those who meet you where you are not where they think you should be. The right people will recognize the journey eventually, or they won't. Either way, the work continues.